Hello grade 3. So today we're going to move to another math lesson. So this is your lesson 3 in math. Today we are going to look at finding the simplest form of a fraction. So we are going to move just a bit away from equivalent fractions. You still need them, but today we are looking at finding the simplest form of a fraction. We also sometimes call it finding the lowest form. That means we keep on breaking a fraction until we cannot break it anymore. So it's in its lowest form. Now, I've given you these examples here. So this is 1/3. So we have 1/3, we have 2/3, and we have 2/5. These are simplest forms of each of the sets of equivalent fraction. That means we cannot break this anymore. That means 1/3, we cannot make it any more smaller than it already is. We cannot break 2/3 anymore. We cannot break 2/5 anymore. Now you ask me, how is that possible, Miss David? Now, we are going to look at why we cannot simplify fractions, these numbers, and why we can simplify these numbers. So how is 4/6, 8/12, 9/15, how are they not considered the simplest form of fraction, and how are these considered not the simplest form of fractions, and how these are the simplest form of fractions? Okay, so each time we go from one fraction to an equivalent fraction with a smaller denominator, so each time we have a smaller denominator, with a smaller numerator, each time we go to an equivalent fraction with a smaller numerator, we simplify the fraction. So each time we move to a smaller numerator, that's called simplifying a fraction. That means we're making it simpler. Okay? Now, let us look at 1/3, 2/3, 2/5, and let us compare it to our 4/6, 8/12, and 9/15. Okay, so let's look at this. How could we determine if a fraction is in its simplest form? Okay, now please pay attention, this is important. Anytime both the numerator and the denominator have even numbers, so anytime they're in even numbers, the fraction cannot be in its simplest form. So anytime, here we have an example, anytime 4 and 6 are even numbers, that means this is not in its simplest form. It's not considered a simplest form. That means we need to simplify it. Okay, so we need to remember these terms, simplest or simplify. So simple forms and simplify. These are two terms you need to remember for this lesson. So anytime our fractions are in even numbers, they are not considered simple. They are not considered to be in simplest forms. The next one is if both the numerator and denominator can be divided by 2, because both of these can be divided by 2, therefore they're not yet in its simplest form. Okay? Then for fractions where both are not even, so where both are not even, right now these are even, where both are not even, anytime the denominator can be evenly divided by the numerator, we do not have the simplest form of fraction. Okay? Right now, this is in its simplest form. But if these were uneven numbers, we would not, uneven numbers, and they can be divided by, then the bottom can be denominator. If you can multiply evenly to the numerator, then they are not in its simplest form. So if we can divide by the numerator, then it's not considered a simplest form. Okay? Then let's say if we have, so right now, oh yes, and also anytime the numerator and denominator can both be divided by the same number, so anytime the numerator or the denominator can be divided by the same number, we do not have the simplest form of the fraction. So that means we need to find the simplest form of fraction. Now, you ask me, Miss David, how do we find the simplest form of fraction? Well, to find the simplest form of fraction, we can keep dividing our numerator and our denominator until there is no whole number that both can be divided by. So I'm going to repeat that again. Okay, grade 3s, this is important. So the way we should be, to find the simplest form of these fractions, because I just told you these are already in their simplest form, to find the simplest forms of any of these fractions, we need to continue to break them down to make them into tiny, tiny, tiny parts until we cannot find any more parts. Okay, so let's say, for example, we have 4 and 6. Okay, if we have 4 and 6, we're going to ask ourselves, which time? So the easy way for us to remember would be, which times table can take both 4 and 6? Always begin with 2. Okay, so I know 2 times table has 4 and 2 times table has 6. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to say 2 times 2 gives me 4. 2 times 3 gives me 6. So 2 over 3 is the simplest form of 4 over 6. Now, I don't know any other times table where we have both 2 and 3. I know 1 times table, but we won't have any other, we cannot simplify it further. Okay, we cannot break it more. Now, so I used whatever I did to the bottom, I did to the top. I divided my 4 to my 4 and 6 to 2 times table. I divided it to 2. Okay, so I did this. 2 times 2 gives me 4, and 2 times 3 gives me 6. Whatever I did to the bottom, I did to the top to simplify my fractions. Okay, now let's do 8 and 12. Which times table has both 8 and 12 in it? Okay, if you cannot think of a bigger number, always start with 2 times table. Okay, always start with 2 times table, and that would make your life much easier, because then you'll be able to see, okay, I need to go further. I need to go further down. I need to make it even more smaller. So let's see. 2 times 1 gives me 2. 2 times 2 gives me 4. 2 times 3 gives me 6. 2 times 4 gives me 8. 2 times 5 gives me 10. 2 times 6 gives me 12. So that means, now, we just learned, if they're both even numbers, they're not in their simplest form. 4 and 6 are even numbers. We just found it here, 4 and 6. That means we need to do one more step. We need to go down one more step. Need to simplify it further. 4 over 6, again, starting with 2 times table. So 2 times 2 gives me 4, and 2 times 3 gives me 6. So 8 over 12 in its simplest form, where we cannot break it any more, we cannot make it any more simpler, 2 over 3 is its simplest form. Okay, then we have 9 and 15. Let's go to 2 times table. 2 times table doesn't have 9. 2 times table doesn't have 15 either. Let's move to my next times table. It's 3 times table. So 3 times what gives me 9 and 3 times what gives me 15? 3 times 1 gives me 3, 3 times 2 gives me 6, 3 times 3 gives me 9, 3 times 4 gives me 12, 3 times 5 gives me 15. Now, can I break this down anymore? I can't break this down anymore. Okay, so it's 3 over 5 is my simplest form of 9 over 15. Okay, I'm gonna repeat the same thing again, grades 3. To find the simplest form, we keep on dividing our numerator and our denominator by the same number until there is no whole number that both can be divided by. Does that make sense? We can now, there is no more whole numbers where we can take both 3 that can take both 3 and 5 in it. Okay, does that make sense? Other than 1, which does not change the fraction. So even if I were to divide these numbers by 1, they wouldn't change the fraction. I would still end up having 3 over 5. I would still end up having 2 over 3. I would still end up having 2 over 3 here. So 1 doesn't, in simplifying, 1 doesn't really count. When we say, oh, but I can simplify it with 1 times table, it would give me the same answer. Okay? So we keep on dividing our numerator and our denominator by the same number until there is no whole number that both can be divided by. Okay? Now, let us look at another example. Okay? So we can have, I'll move this a bit back. I hope you can all see. 8 over 10. We know that both these numbers are even. And so, another easy way to simplify fractions is ask yourself, can I break it into half? Can we break 8 into half? What's a half of 8? A half of 8 is 4. Can I break my 10 into half? Absolutely. What's half of 10? 5. Now, let's stop here and ask ourselves, even though I can break my 4 into 2, but I cannot break my 5 into half. It's not going to be an even number. Does that make sense? It can't be an even number. We cannot break it evenly. So even though my top number, I can break it, I can make it into another half, but I can't break this one. So therefore, this would be wrong. I cannot just say, oh, I'll just break my top, but I don't need to break my bottom. Remember, whatever we do to the top, we must do to the bottom. In this case, we cannot break it anymore. We can break our top, our numerator, but we cannot break our denominator. So therefore, the simplest form is 4 over 5. Does that make sense? Since they're both even, again, we can have half. So since this was both even, we broke it into half. But after that, we can't go any further. Okay? Please remember, whatever you do to the bottom, you do to the top. So another way of simplifying, we look at how can we break them into halves. Okay? I used division. Whatever number you use to divide the bottom with, you need to use the same to divide the top with. Okay? On that note, you are going to grades 3. You are going to move to exercise 34, and you are going to finish exercise 34. And the textbook reference I used was page 74. And on that note, I am going to end our lesson and I will see you next time.